Hey guys, I am going to be doing a book talk on The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963. And this book was written by Christopher Paul Curtis. And I'm just going to kind of go through some of my notes that I have. I'm going to go through information about the author and characters and setting and important points in the book that relate to counter narratives and sort of give you some highlights on some of the issues that this book explores and investigates and sort of challenges readers and activists to take a different perspective and sort of visit that civil rights era. So anyway, let's get started. So starting with information about the author. So Christopher Paul Curtis was born on May 10th, 1953, and he grew up in Flint, Michigan, which, as we all know, is the setting in this book and is actually a prominent setting in several of the books that he has written. So I think it's really cool that he can sort of take a place that he grew up in, and he knows and he loves, and he sort of wants to like share that with the rest of the world and sort of tell them about it. So I thought that was really cool. In 1967, he was the first African American student to be elected to the student council in the school's 32-year history. So even before he graduated high school, he was trying to make big moves in his life. The summer after graduating from that same high school, he became a member of the theatrical musical group called the Suitcase Theater, and they performed in Great Britain, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, Canada, and the United States. So he was not only a captivated reader and a renowned writer, he also found another creative outlet to use through musical theater, and I thought that was really awesome. Let's see. He worked with his father at the Fisher Body plant, and he was earning money so that he could actually go to the University of Michigan at Flint. Of course, where else would he go? And in 1993, he took time off to concentrate on writing, and that's when he actually wrote The Watsons Go to Birmingham. And actually, an early draft of that book was released while he was at the University of Michigan at Flint, and he won the Jules Hopwood Prize from that university for the story that he was writing. We also know that he won the Newbery Honor and the Coretta Scott King Award for this book. And he was the first African American recipient of the Newbery Medal for Children's Literature. Besides reading, one of his greatest passions was writing, but it was mostly to overcome boredom that he felt working that job with his father. So first it kind of started off as like letters and sketch ideas for stories, and he sort of kind of got the courage and the intuition and the inspiration to carry that forward and say, I think I could do this for a living. I think that I could write about things that are really meaningful, and I think that people would really enjoy the voice that I have to share with the world. So he sort of went for it, and let's see. And that's what led him to be one of America's greatest authors of children's literature. His most recent book, which is entitled Elijah of Buxton, won a Newbery Honor, the Coretta Okay, sorry, one second, back up. It won the Newbery Honor, the Coretta Scott King Award, and the Scott Odell Award for Historical Fiction in 2008. It's kind of hit the trifecta there for children's literature awards, which is really special. Okay, him and his wife live in Canada, and they have 4 children together, which he deeply cares about and loves. In addition to reading and writing, he enjoys playing basketball, and he really enjoys music. And he actually said a quote that I really liked, and he says, the Watsons will always be special to me because it broke me out of the warehouse I was working in. I'm doing something that I want to do finally." So obviously this book meant a lot to him, and when he finally got that courage to kind of write what he knew about, I think that was a really pinnacle moment in his life. So we always appreciate that as readers. Okay, all right. Next, we're going to move on to characters and setting. So the setting of this book, like I said previously, is in Flint, Michigan, and that's where Kenny's father was born and raised, and his mother is actually from Birmingham, Alabama, which is not only a difference in geographically, right? Because you have Flint, Michigan up here in the north, and you have Birmingham, Alabama all the way in the south. But especially during the civil rights era, the ways that African Americans were treated were totally different. In the north, the whole Watson's family was kind of sheltered from that. It was totally not as severe and violent, and you moved down into the south and it was a completely different ball game. Like we were kind of talking about in class on Wednesday with Dr. Gross, like the South had this really tight grip and this reign on what they thought that the world should be like, and African Americans weren't slaves anymore, but that idea that they should be on the same playing field as whites, and that they should be equal citizens, was not easily grasped at all. So that was kind of something that, you know, Kenny and his brother Byron and his little sister, like, they kind of knew about, maybe heard about it through the grapevine, but that was something that they really, you know, it was not something that they experienced firsthand. Okay, so that's the setting. And then going into characters, so the main character is going to be Kenny Watson, and he is, he's very, I think he knows himself pretty well, but he's still at that age where he's trying to figure out the world. I think that he really cares about his family, and, you know, he wants the best for everyone. And he's sort of, he's naive in some ways, but he also, he has this, like, intuition about what other people are feeling. So, like, when he, when things would happen with Byron or his mother, you know, he would be like, well, I knew Mama was mad because she gets this look in her eyes and she gets this real Southern tone, and I knew she was upset, or I knew Byron was going to do something off the wall because he just starts to, you know, act a certain way. So he's very, like, receptive of the world around him for his age, I would say. I mean, he's still trying to figure a few things out, but I thought he was a pretty receptive character for his age. Byron is his brother, who is always causing trouble, and just sort of thinks that he knows it all a little bit, and he's kind of always, you know, pushing buttons that he shouldn't necessarily be doing. He's a little bit like I was growing up, actually, not really wanting to admit it, but it's true. Just sort of trying to experiment with the world and see what he can get away with. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons that you know, Kenny's dad explains to him. He says, listen, we have to take him down to Birmingham because he thinks that this world, all these jokes are waiting around for him, and the world is not like that, especially when we're going to go down south to Birmingham. Like, the world's going to put him in his place real quick. And, you know, that was one of the father's motives, and the mother's motives for kind of going on that journey with their family, to say, like, listen, like, we've crafted a home here for you. Like, we care about you and we want the best for you, but, you know, you have this naive nature that you can just get away with and do whatever you want, and it's going to always be for a big laugh, and that's just not the case. And, you know, better to learn that sooner than later, right? And then the younger sister, her name is Joey, and she's very innocent and kind of just like Kenny. She wants the whole family to get along, like at all costs. She wants everyone to be happy, and she just doesn't really. She's so young. I mean, she's like in kindergarten, so she is kind of under this impression that, you know, the whole world like should be, you know, very gentle and full of smiles, and a part of her is really right, you know, like why is the world so full of this, like, you know, manipulation and hate sometimes? And she, you know, sort of offers that counterpart argument of like, you know, we're family, we should exist together, the world should exist together. Like, you know, she can't really put that together because she still hasn't really been a part of or investigated the world in that way. So she kind of offers that very innocent mindset that, you know, we want to try to keep inside of ourselves, you know, even when we grow into adults, we want to be able to say that, yeah, we should be happy. We should treat others with respect. It shouldn't be as hard as we make it sometimes. So I think she kind of offers that perspective and is probably the role that she plays in this novel. Let's see. The next person that I am going to go to is the dad, and his name is Daniel Watson, and he is very, very witty, and he always keeps the family laughing. And he also tries to do what's best for his family. He doesn't seem to be much of a yeller. He seems to really explain things to his kids, you know, like when he's in the brown bomber, which is their car, when he's there with Kenny, he's kind of leveling with him and talking to him as an equal person, and explaining to him why he feels the way that he feels. So I think in that way, like, he's a great father. He doesn't play this, I'm here and you're way down here and what I say goes. Like, he seems to keep the family very involved, and I just think that that is so important for the patriarch of the family to act like and to uphold. So I really love that about him. They're always kind of, you know, playing these jokes, like, you know, when Byron does that silly thing with his hair, he doesn't yell, he doesn't hit him, he just takes him upstairs and he gives him this, you know, crazy haircut, and he's like, well, you know, like, you shouldn't have done this. So he's a good father, and yeah, he kind of keeps things light, and I think ultimately, like the rest of the family members, he just wants what's best for them. Okay, and let's see, the next one I'm going to do is Mama Watson, and she is very, she's kind of got like this fire in her eyes. I feel like every time I picture her, I just picture like this, you know, mother who's always like cooking and like keeping the family together. Like, she's very much like the thermostat of the household, you know, like she keeps everyone straight, and she, you know, she knows what she knows and she says what she feels, and that's it, you know. She's a very strong character, like, and we see that in evidence, like when Byron doesn't want to go to the grocery store because he thinks that the family's on welfare, and she kind of puts him in his place, and she says, you know what, if we were to be on welfare, if we were struggling, like, we're giving you the best that we can, and you need to know that at the end of the day, like, our love for you and our determination to be good parents to you should be enough, you know. And she kind of offers that kind of like stronghold grip on what is right, especially in a family, and I feel like, you know, it's good that she kind of offers that side. And, you know, the father is kind of more, you know, he's more like funny and everything, and she's a very stronghold. She's like the staple of the family, and I just really respect her for that. Let's see, the last character that I thought was super vital and important was Rufus. And Rufus is the friend of Kenny, who he's the new kid in school, and he is bullied for his super southern thick accent, and he's not very rich at all. He's actually very poor, and he wears the same clothes like every other day, and kids really pick on him for it, and they make him feel like he's nothing. And him and Ketty sort of develop this friendship, and I think it happens at a really good time when Kenny needs a friend like that, right? And obviously Rufus moving in like this and having to deal with this degrading bullying, like he feels the same way. So they kind of offer this point of, you can really sit down and you can really be friends with anyone, no matter what the rest of the world has to say. You can be the person who says, I'm going to get to know this person because I really don't know them. And all of these judgments, they're at face value. And, if you experience the world at face value all the time, then the amount of depth that you're missing below that surface is incredible. And they're like a firm demonstration of that. So I think their friendship was a super, super staple for the book that might have otherwise been missed out on. And let's see. Okay, that pretty much covers it for what I have for that. The next one says, the book as a counter-narrative that represent authentic voices that critique dominant cultural assumptions. Okay, so I'm going to use the book to kind of use some quotes to help what I have to say. The first one that I came up with was on page 128. And this is when Joey receives the angel doll. And it's from Mrs. Davidson, that was her name. Sorry, I had to look it up. So let me pick a good place to start. Okay, I'll start here. I was very proud of the way you behaved, Joetta. What was wrong? That angel, Mommy. Oh, Mrs. Davidson said it reminded me of her, but it didn't look like me at all. Mama looked around the room. Where'd you put it? It's in my socks drawer. Joey was so neat she had a separate drawer for socks. Mama went and got the angel and sat next to Joey. Sweetheart, I can see how it reminds her of you. Look at that dimple. But Mommy, it's white. Mama laughed. Well, honey, I can't say that it isn't, but an angel's an angel. What do you think? Okay, so that was my first example of offering this kind of counter-narrative of sometimes that we're not very, that we need to be careful of how we handle instances like this. Like, if I were to put myself into Joetta's shoes, if I was that little girl, I would say, why isn't this doll African American? Like, why are the dolls always white? Like, why isn't there a representation of my skin color or my culture or who I am as a person? Like, why is it always white? And that was a very real thing. It was like people, they didn't, it wasn't really a part of their thinking. They, it's like the same thing as, the water fountains. They were like, well, what difference does it make? Like, you have your water fountain, we have ours. Like, stop complaining. And, I think the representation of this doll was kind of like, I'm tired of being misrepresented, or I'm tired of not being represented at all. Like, I'm receiving this gift that doesn't really, resonate with me whatsoever, and I think she knew Mrs. Davidson didn't mean anything by it, but isn't that also the truth of it sometimes too? We don't mean anything by it, but what's the actual reality that's happening? How are we making people feel? Do they feel involved? Do they feel represented? Or do they constantly feel marginalized? And that's something, I think that Curtis wants us to think about as readers. I think that's exactly why he put that in there. Okay, so the next one I have to talk about is Rufus feeling humiliation and resentment when he comes to the new school. And I think that was more of like the counter narrative was more for like bullying. Maybe it wasn't like race related, but it did give that authentic voice for how we should treat people, even when we don't know them or they look different from what we look like, right? You know, he was poor. He wore the same clothes all the time, but what difference does that make? You know, why should you treat another human being like that? It goes back to that based on that surface level meaning, right? You're missing this whole other layer upon layer upon layer of a person because you think you're right in these face level judgments, right? So I thought, you know, their friendship was kind of standing up to that and saying, like, I don't care what the rest of the people say, I'm going to be friends with him. And even when Rufus got mad at Kenny, and he said, you know, I thought you were different. I thought you really liked me for me, and you were just laughing with the rest of them. And, you know, Kenny was kind of saying, like, oh my God, like, how could I have done that to someone? You know, I want him to know that I care and that I am different. You know, he says that in the book. I am different. And they're able to fix their friendship, you know, and that was kind of him saying, like, I do want to be your friend. I do want to do the right thing. And, you know, I felt that was a really powerful, like, bullying counter narrative that, you know, we forget about sometimes. Another one was page 146. Okay. Man, they got crackers and rednecks up here that ain't even seen no Negroes before. If they caught your ass out here, like they'd hang you now, then eat you later. What's a redneck? A hillbilly, only worse. Some of them don't even speak English. And that's sort of a look into what Byron kind of thought of white people. And during the civil rights era, I think I could put myself in Byron's shoes and I could, you know, feel that type of like anger, you know, because you're totally being marginalized and hated and treated differently because of the color of your skin. Well, intuition at that age or at that maturity level kind of says, oh, well, you're a redneck. You barely even speak English. You know, he kind of rebuttals that hate with more kind of hate in his own way, right? So I thought that was sort of a representation of sometimes that, you know, whites were marginalized against. And lastly, was on page 203. And this is when Byron is talking to Kenny after what had happened in Birmingham. I don't want to spoil it, but this is near the end. And he said, Kenny, things ain't ever going to be fair. How's it fair that two grown men could hate Negroes so much that they'd kill some kids just to stop them from going to school? How's it fair that even though the cops down there might know who did it, nothing will probably ever happen to those men? It ain't. But you just gotta stand by, that's the way it is, and keep on stepping. And I really liked what he had to say about that because it kind of offered the idea that none of this, whether it was illegal, not legal, whether like, you know, legislation had passed or any of this, none of this was really fair. And that he had to kind of keep on going and he had to keep on doing the right thing and he had to keep on being himself, right? So it kind of offers that narrative of keep going, no matter what's going on, keep on trucking, keep on being yourself, keep on standing up for what is right, and eventually, like, you will get through, you know? Because at this point, like, he probably felt pretty defeated, you know? He was kind of under the impression that this was like a fun family vacation that they were going on, and he saw something that changed him forever. And I think he needed to hear that from Byron, because he was scared. He had never seen anything like that before. So that was kind of that counter narrative saying, like, I know the world is hard, I know it's tough, stand up, keep on going. Okay, the next one is, how did the characters challenge and dismantle this oppression and or stereotypes? I'm gonna reference Kenny and Rufus's friendship again by saying that I almost felt like their friendship was a little bit of a foreshadowing of what happened at the end, because what happened at the end was something that was really like full of hatred and was definitely anger, like being infused on a group of people. And I felt like these kids were bullying Rufus with that kind of same hatred and anger that was so unwarranted. And it was kind of, by their friendship, they were kind of challenging that and saying, like, is it right that you bully him? Is it right that you call him these names? Is it right that you don't even know him and you claim that you do? And that was, like, I think one of the first challenges that I noticed. And then again, we have Kenny making the statement, I don't really know how these white people could hate little kids so much. And that's kind of, it's challenging the reader to think about that, right? Because at that point in time, Kenny had seen, like, newspaper clippings of angry white people, yelling at little black kids about the desegregation of schools, and he had heard it through the grapevine. And, when he offers that line, he's kind of challenging the reader to say, yeah, like, why do they have these hate towards little children? Are they thinking about their anger and how it's being inflicted on the rest of the world, even our little kids that we cherish? We're not pointing it directly at them, but Martin Luther King was the one who said, anything that we do directly, we do indirectly. So we don't think that it affects children, but it does. Everything we do affects children. They're constantly looking at us and the world around them. And if that's the choice that we choose to inflict, that hatred, that judgment, and they're there, that's what they receive. That's the feelings that they get from you. And he's kind of challenging that. Let's see, the next one was page 199 I had a quote from. Why would they do that, Byron? I was sounding real bad. My throat was jumping around in my neck and making a bunch of weird noises. Why would they hurt some little kids like that? He waited a long time before he answered. I don't know, Kenny. Mama and Dad said they can't help themselves. They did it because they're sick, but I don't know. I ain't never heard of no sickness that makes you kill little girls just because you don't want them in your school. I don't think they're sick at all. I think they just let hate eat them up and turn them into monsters. But it's okay. They can't hurt you here. It's all right. So that's, again, where Byron is kind of challenging that and saying, like, people make up their excuses sometimes for them. Oh, they're sick, they don't understand. And I understand that argument, but, this is Byron kind of saying, like, I do think that hate kind of eats them up inside, and it goes back to that point of saying people fear what they do not understand, They're kind of saying, we don't know them, we don't want to know them, they're the enemy, they're not a part of us. And that kind of just eats away at you, right? So instead of, like, feeling this love and joy in your heart and kind of getting to know people and letting that, out into the world for yourself to feel and for little kids to know and be a part of, for other colleagues to be and know and be a part of, that's a choice. And you kind of either let that out or you let out the other one. The other one I have is family love versus worldly hate. The events at the end of the story offer a really terrible illustration of the effects of hate, but at the end we see the Watsons, the weird Watsons, kind of come together through that and kind of help each other out. And as disturbing as it was to read about what had happened at the end, I don't want to spoil it, but it did show that family connection, that kind of trumps all things and gets us through all things. And I think that also kind of challenges the reader to think about, if we can emulate that practices among close brothers and close sisters, well, there's an entire world out there that we can give that to too. It doesn't have to be limited to people who are related by blood, and that we all share that human connection, that, the very fact that we are humans. It doesn't have to be limited to our family. Okay, last question. How does this book provide a platform for opening up critical conversations about discrimination and or activism? What happens at the end is something that really shakes up Kenny, and it has the whole family kind of come together and talk about, what had happened, what's going on, like how does that relate to us? And it kind of gives that call to action for not only the characters in the book but for the reader themselves, right? Because if they're investing and relating to these characters, they're going to say to themselves, like, I kind of take a different turn on this. Like, I see how the character is feeling. Like, well, how do I feel? And I saw that on page 201, and Byron says, dig this. You can wait behind that couch for the rest of your life, and ain't no magic powers gonna come back there and make you feel nothing. Only thing that's gonna happen back there is that you're gonna stunt your growth from being in a little ball all day. And I think kind of what he's saying here is the world can be scary sometimes, and we may not understand it, and we may, not even really feel a part of it sometimes. We may see people doing things that we don't agree with. We may make mistakes ourselves. Of course we're going to, but it's sort of what we do after that, It's kind of like that saying, like, get knocked down 7 times, stand up 8. And I think that's kind of what Byron is telling his brother. Let's see, anything else? Again, the friendship of Kenny and Rufus. I just really like that friendship, and I feel like that was a really big spokesperson platform in the novel. That despite the bullying and despite the differences between Rufus and the other kids that he meets at the school, that their friendship was real, and it was and that was the right thing, not judging someone based on what they look like or how much money they have. I'm not going to spoil it, but something I have written down here is hate itself can be a deadly weapon, and that, I think, is a huge point of activism for us, but I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to spoil the ending. Let's see, anything else here? Alright, I think that's all. I went way over the time that I wanted to, but that's okay. But anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this book talk, and I hope it offers you further insights and maybe inspiration to read this book. And actually, this is the only one I've read by this author, so I'm probably going to take a look at other ones after this. So anyway, thanks for listening.